I'm Karen Sheeder. I'm a filmmaker, songwriter, actor and activist. In the mid-90s I became involved in disability arts, part of a vigorous and focused disability movement. Back then, disabled people were determined and inspired, excited by the struggle to gain basic rights such as access to public transport, financial independence and the right to live in the community instead of being hidden away in institutions. Slowly, the policymakers and people in power began to listen to us. Slowly, the penny began to drop. And in Britain today, we have many of the rights that disabled people have fought for since the 1970s. But now, the disabled people of this country are scared. The proposed cuts in frontline services and the welfare reforms will have a direct and drastic impact upon the lives of disabled people and their families and loved ones. I've been talking to some of these people in the northeastern Cumbria about their fears and about the possible impacts of the changes. First, I travelled to Northumberland to meet lifelong animal lover Muriel, who explained to us why she has every reason to dread cuts in frontline services on the estate where she lives with her sister in Blythe.
I'm Muriel Henderson, I'm 63-year-old. I've lived in this house for 61 years with my twin sister Doris. We've both suffered from retinitis pigmentosus, which my sister Doris lost most of her sight altogether 2 years ago, and she's only got a tiny bit on the left hand side. I've still got some peripheral vision, but it's not clear, and it's also my central vision is gone altogether. We've had low level crime against her for years, for 40 years, but name calling mainly. But we started with smashing the garden fence, the garden gate. Then it escalated to lots of stoning, groups of youths and kids. Every time we came in, stoning the windows. We couldn't put any lights on in the room. This room we're sitting in. I've never sat actually in this room for 5 years because we couldn't put the lights on because they knew we were in the room and started stoning the windows. But then 12:30 midnight, I was just about to go to sleep, and there's heard the garden gate click, and then there's tremendous bang, and the front door was kicked in. Then was a bedroom window was done at 3:15 in the morning. The house was being stoned sometimes through the night, early morning. Obstacles were being put in my way to come in the garden. We had to get new garden gates, new front doors, more locks put on, perspex put over the windows because the bay window was broken. There's the bolt on the very bottom of the door. There's the mortise lock. There's the bolt at the centre of the door. Then there's the deadlock. And then there's the security chain. And then the last thing is this metal bar. It's put across the whole door and frame. It slots in there and drops in a slot over here. Then you can lock it up. I was bending down to lock the gate, and these big youth come over and he's shouting in my face, "I'm going to fix your blind eyes with a hammer and give you glass eyes. I'm going to give you good effing and I'm going to do all your windows." And I said, "That's it." I came in the house, I picked up the phone and I phoned the police, and I says to them, no more, I've had enough. You either come and sort these people out now. You either come and fix these people now. I says, or I'm going out and I'm going to sort them out myself. I says, because they kept saying to me, lock the door, don't go out, just lock the door. I says, I'm a prisoner in my own home. This had gone on for 5 years. And I says, no longer. I says, I'm going out, and I says, I'm going out swinging. I'm not going out empty-handed. I says, because I've got arthritis, so I'm not going to punch them with my hand. I'm going to hit them with something. And I says, no longer. And there says, they're shouting at us down the phone, don't do that, stay in your house. Don't go, because it can take the weapon off you and hit you. And I says, I no longer care what happens.
Despite the torment that the Henderson twins have experienced at the hands of local youths, they remain fiercely independent and determined to remain in their home and to continue to live their lives in their own way, whatever the consequences.
We're coming home one night, this car pulled up, was coming close behind her, and I said to my sister, who can't see in the dark, she holds onto the bicycle which I carry her stuff on, and she was wheeling, had a hold of it. I just told her to get ready to move because there was a car coming alongside her very slowly in case something was going to be thrown that way again. I says, but yeah, it was a gentleman who rolled down the window, and he said he's a local community support officer. Are you ladies on your way home? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, can I see you home? And honestly, to tell you the honest truth, it was just, we just couldn't believe it. We were so gobsmacked, and we said, yeah, please do. Someone actually cared. Someone cared to get her home, to see we get to the door safe.
So how have things changed since the community support officer's been on the scene?
Oh, there was a great deal of difference, particularly us personally. He was a visible presence. Even though, as I said, he was only a community support officer, he's linked up to the police. He could get somebody if we needed it. And also, it was just the care that this chap had for knowing that we were in so much trouble, and he was actually helping, and it did make a hell of a difference. He actually gave our life back. We can go to bed with less fear that this is going to be, that someone's going to attack the house while we're asleep. It's amazing the difference it's made just for one person to care what's happening to you.
So what are your fears if there are cuts in the police community support service?
When I heard that there was going to be police cuts on the television, I rang up the local headquarters, which is at Ponteland, and I asked them, why, who's in charge of this, what's being cut? It's not the community support officer, says it. And he says, no, it's not. He says it's excuse me, it is actually just police officers. The community support officers are funded differently. I says, who's in charge of them? And he says, that's he says they're funded by the government. And I says, oh right. I says, in that case, I says, it's David Cameron's head I've got to go down and jump up and down on. I says, if he dares touch my community support officer, I says, because no one is going to touch my community support officer. I says, I do not like London. I've only been there once, but I would go down to London myself on the train and sit outside his door until they made sure that I wasn't going to lose my community support officer. If I had to, I would do it.
The fear and anger engendered by the cuts has already galvanised many other disabled people into action. Claire is a relatively new campaigner who's fast becoming a key figure in the battle to preserve the quality of life, not only for visually impaired people in the region, but the wider disability community.
My name's Claire Parker. I'm being visually impaired since birth. I'm currently a volunteer campaign coordinator for the RNIB.
One of the major concerns to disabled people at the moment are the proposed changes to DLA. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what the ramifications could be?
The currently free rates for disability living allowance, which is for care and for mobility. The new proposed personal independent payment means that will be 2 rates, which is only going to focus on those with the greatest need. Those of us who don't meet this threshold are not only going to be losing financial support, but also our independence and quality of life. We rely a lot on disability living allowance to help meet the additional costs of living with a disability. These aren't just for care and support, but also for the costs of everyday living, like transport and cooking equipment, adaptations, magnification. The list can go on, but all these things help disabled people to have more independent lives. I think the cuts are not only going to affect disabled people, but also their family and carers. Many are struggling with little or no help or risk losing benefits and services that they rely on.
The changes in the welfare reform system and their catastrophic effects are already being experienced firsthand by the Percival family from Kendal.
Well, I'm Sally Percival and I'm from Cumbria. I'm mum to Alexander and Victoria. Victoria is 22 and Alexander is now 20. When Alexander was 3, he was diagnosed with severe learning disabilities and autism.
What was the catalyst with regard to recent changes in benefits that's made you want to speak out now?
Well, I've been caring for Alexander for the last 20 years, and to be honest, while he was a child, the benefits that we received and the support we received were ample. We managed to do all the normal things that you would expect from a family, and we could afford to do things like go on the occasional holiday. Suddenly, at 20 and 1 day, all of the benefits changed without any former advice or information, and they reduced from £277 a week plus carers allowance down to my income support became £42 plus carers allowance, and Alexander is now being given £62 a week employment support allowance, which is a vast difference to what we were able to claim. But one of the biggest issues was around the advice and information I got from the helplines, for the employment and support helplines. And on every single occasion that I rang them for help, I got wrong information. I got told to use Google. I was told that that the helpline staff weren't actually trained about disability issues. And one lady said it's absolute chaos. We really don't know what's happening. And that, for a family who's in a period of change, is quite frightening, because you want to know that you can afford to pay your bills. The other issue was mortgage payments. Because of a change in government formulas, again, without any prior knowledge, my mortgage contribution doubled. Now, I had to find that money from somewhere, and it has put huge pressure financially on how I pay for my mortgage, the food. I mean, holidays are now out of the question, days out and out of the question. And at the end of the day, if I failed to pay my mortgage, Alexander, the transition to going into another home would be terribly cost the government a huge amount, and it would put Alexander into an absolute meltdown.
How do you feel that the media currently views and portrays disabled people and carers who are on benefits?
Recently, with all the cuts and the media profile about the cuts, I felt that the media and the public's perception that all people on benefits are getting something for nothing, are scrounging off the state, and should go out and get proper work. We care 24/7, often all night. We're saving this country millions of pounds, but the perception is that we are getting benefits, we're scroungers, and we are getting something for nothing.
Similar sentiments were expressed by Jane Reist, Director of Redcar and Cleveland's Real Opportunities Centre, a disability-led organisation which runs Redcar's Shop Mobility and Information Service, an independent living resource, and campaigns for citizenship on an equal basis for disabled people. It's clear that ROC provides a number of very valuable frontline services. How have these been affected by cuts in funding?
Since April of this year, ROC has had a decrease in its funding of 57%. And that 57% loss of funding is a consequence of the front-loaded cuts to the local authority, and primarily, but not exclusively, because of area-based grant. We were commissioned to deliver our information shop mobility service through that, but we've managed to actually put together quite a complicated package of funding to keep us going until March, but at the moment that's all. Now, our information shop mobility service clearly is about independence, clearly is about people being able to navigate the maze of information, to build social capital, and also the disability pound in terms of people coming and shopping in the town.
Are you finding that ROC's services are being required by more disabled people while the organisation is experiencing diminished resources?
We've actually taken a very sort of clear line as an organisation that we won't do work that we have not been funded to do. We get quite a number of requests to be involved with what is the view of disabled people. Can you involve disabled people in this particular policy? Could we be involved in the development of some service or other? And I think the challenge for us has been to actually be very clear that we no longer have such an in-depth mandate. And it's very tempting for an organisation to continue to work with people, but actually it makes no sense in the longer run. It's not sustainable. So we have kind of not taken a halfway house position, and unless we have funding and resources to support and do things well, we're not going to get involved on a tokenistic basis.
Redcar ROC has a long history of successful campaigning, so it was inevitable that representatives of their organisation would answer the rallying call for disabled people across the country to protest against the proposed welfare reforms. I'm in Newcastle today to take part in a demonstration which is being organised by the Hardest Hit campaign. It's one of a number of demonstrations which is taking place in cities across the UK.
Hiya, my name is Angie Stewart and I live in Newcastle and I'm Service Development Officer for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. I'm able to work full time and therefore I haven't suffered from any of the benefits cuts so far. But I think for people who genuinely aren't able to do that, they are going to be the people that are going to be the hardest hit.
My name's Lorna, I'm a middle-aged mum, I live in Catterick Garrison. I'm lucky, I go to work every day, I can afford to let my house cool down, but these people, a lot of them are housebound and they don't get out. How on earth are they going to heat a house all day? There's just nowhere else to go, there's nothing left to cut. And it just incensed me and thought I should come here and support if I can.
We need to ensure that the government ensures that the DLA isn't going to make people worse off, and that the assessment process is going to take account of the different needs of disabled people, particularly those with fluctuating conditions, and that it's recognised that disabled people that need to meet the additional costs of living with a disability. Together we are sending a clear message to this government and to those local decision makers who provide the services we rely on. Stop the cuts.
How proud I am to stand shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand with the people I see before me today. And let us just put on record that I cannot see any scroungers in this crowd. Will not tolerate any time, any government calling anybody who was on benefits scroungers.
The reality is that the number of people being overpaid incapacity benefit due to fraud is just 0.3%. The real story is that many people are living in fear of cuts to essential benefits like disability living allowance and employment and support allowance.
They tell us volunteers should help to provide social services. They want billions used to run our hospitals to be moved into community nursing, but at the same time they're cutting the numbers of district nurses and specialist nurses. And yes, they want to debate about the financial crisis, but they want to con us into believing it was our fault instead of their speculative friends in the City of London.
Right, 1,000 people have come to Newcastle today to campaign against the government's welfare reform bill, which I think we want to call it the welfare destruction bill. It's a lot more accurate. I think what we're here today to express is the fear people have of being driven onto job seekers allowance, of losing their disability living allowance, of generally getting poorer at a time when some parts of our society are getting richer. That fear is very real today. I suppose everybody hopes whatever campaign is built, if it maybe doesn't even stop the welfare reform bill now, at some point in the future it can reverse whatever cuts are made, and we can build a mass campaign to promote disability rights, promote carers' rights, and basically try to ensure that we're relying not on charity, but our right to services and right to the benefits we need.
The remit of this programme was to try and find some of the stories behind the headlines and statistics relating to welfare reform and cuts in frontline services. There are many, many other voices that need to be heard, and some of their stories can be found on websites such as that of the Hardest Hit campaign. There are also numerous ways in which you can ensure that your own voice is heard if you support the considered, compassionate and sensitive review of the issues featured in this programme. The majority of the people who contacted us in response to our research are articulate, informed people who are able to stand up for their rights. But there are hundreds of thousands of disabled people and their carers who need to be represented if we are to ensure that their lives aren't casually blighted by isolation, poverty and misery in the name of cuts in services and welfare reform. If you are able to speak out, please don't let the hard-won rights of disabled people be eroded simply by doing nothing. Disabled people and their families and supporters can help by joining one of the numerous campaigns against cuts in services and welfare reforms. Many of these are online and include the Hardest Hit campaign, Disabled People Against Cuts, Stop the Cuts campaign, Northern Ireland, and www.carewatch.com/reforms. These are just a few examples. You can also write to your MP in the traditional manner. Use local media to highlight the difficulties you or a loved one are facing as a result of the cuts. However you decide to become involved, do it soon. We wish to get the main points and recommendations included in this film across to policymakers, service providers and those who shape the media representation of disabled people and carers. We need to ensure that disabled people who are the target of hate crime will be given adequate support from the police and government to remain safely in their own homes. Although in Muriel's case this was achieved through the deployment of a PCSO, where these aren't available or appropriate, regular and adequate police support should be guaranteed to people who are frequent victims of abuse in their communities. Changes in DLA won't make people worse off. That the assessment process is fair and takes account of the different needs of disabled people and those with fluctuating conditions. That disabled people will be supported with the additional costs of living with a disability. That councils protect funding for social care services and voluntary sector organisations to preserve the independence and dignity of disabled people and provide vital support to their families who care for them. The recognition of the contribution of carers. Staff on vital telephone helplines such as that of the Employment and Support Allowance are given thorough training, including sensitive and wide-ranging disability equality training. That the media present a balanced view of the lives and experiences of disabled people and carers and resist applying the label of scrounger at every opportunity. Disability equality training could be useful here too.